Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very, very overdue episode number 65 of Relating to DevSecOps, where we explore the development, security, and operational issues of today so we can solve real world problems with people that face them. You've got Mike and Ken here, your hosts for today, coming back from a little bit of a hiatus. I feel like every episode we come back and say, well, it's been a long time, but this time we had some excuses. We were doing that training at LASCON, and so hopefully we can just do a little bit of a take on where we've been, what we've been doing, what our takeaways are from conferences and trainings and all that kind of stuff today as we enter this episode. So there's going to be a lot of focus on what we took away from LASCON 2023 in Austin, Texas, and just covering general themes that we've seen so far today. So if you're into that and wanna hear some hot takes, then you're in the right place. Mike, what is your initial hot take coming back from LASCON? And you had some other conferences too, like B-Sides and OWASP Nova and all that kind of thing. So what are the major things you're seeing and hearing about pounding the pavement?
Well, my big takeaway from LASCON was the flu, which I don't recommend for anyone. That's not LASCON's fault, but yeah, it's just the con flu, you know. No, I
You
mean
gotta
I
take
think
better
LASCON.
care of yourself, you know?
Yeah, we'll blame American Airlines for my lack of sleep. Um, but no, I think LASCON was definitely good. It definitely felt like it bounced back from kind of post COVID years, and there's a lot more energy. The training that we did, I thought was awesome. Not to toot our own horn, but I thought it was like really, really good content, and there's awesome feedback from the people who attended. So thanks to those folks who attended, and we'll definitely dive into more of that. But no, I thought it was a pretty solid conference. You can't really beat Austin for the food, and yeah, I think there was a lot more energy than there's been at some other conferences recently. So my takeaway was it was pretty solid.
Yeah, it was good to see folks back in real life. The last conference I went to, well, the last con I went to, it was a little bit. It wasn't very well attended. Obviously, COVID and all that. People were just getting back into the conference circuit, a bit nervous and things like that. So this was like the first full one that I've seen, and it was really good to have a little bit of the hallway con again, and to see
Hmm.
people talking about what they're doing and what they're working on. And I think we're finally back into a place where we can have those conversations again. So that was really really cool. Um, Major themes at LastCon for sure. I mean, you said this in I think the last episode. Just a lot of AI, a lot of
Yeah.
a lot of AI, both in the security world and um, on the build side. You probably saw you were running a booth there, so you probably saw a lot more folks coming to you with problems than solutions. Anything you want to chat through on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are definitely interested in. I mean, everyone wants kind of like your take on, is AI going to solve every problem? Is AI going to create every problem? Like people, there's seems like people are on one side or the other. It's like AI is going to solve everything. We're going to have AGI in 2 years, and we're not going to have jobs anymore. So that side of the house is very positive, very a little bit of doomerism because if we don't have jobs, that's kind of an issue. But they're very like AI is going to solve everything. Then you have the people who are on the other side who are like AI is going to ruin everything. Better ransomware, better phishing attacks, better this and better that. So there's definitely a lot of that, and trying to get people's opinions on what do you think, what are you seeing, and what are your thoughts on how AI is going to affect security. So that was interesting, but I think otherwise there's a lot of the normal kind of conversations still happening at application security conferences. I think we still cover a lot of the basics. I think you saw a couple of talks that were more about culture, and you can probably talk to those. But yeah, I think it was pretty interesting. There's a lot more energy, and people were definitely had something new to talk about besides SQL injection in 2023.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if everyone's a little bit interested in how we approach the problem on both sides. Um, I did attend a few of the AI talks because I wanted to see what people were saying. Two interesting things that came away for me is one, like how we defend against these things, and I think the way that the way that most folks are using AI these days, and we say AI, but we talk about LLMs and I think OpenAI and ChatGPT are the major, at least initial um, pathways into like what we are calling AI, right? And it is a really loaded word, and I've seen that there are different perspectives on this, right? I think that folks that have been in this AI machine learning world for a long time kind of roll their eyes at the fact that we're just calling everything AI, which I totally get. But I think that the way that folks are getting introduced to AI right now, I mean, it's no secret. I'm not saying anything unique here. Is through OpenAI and ChatGPT, and so one of the interesting takeaways that I had was approaching this AI security, not from like the OWASP LLM top 10 or whatever it might be, because these are all like model specific things to consider. But most folks are using an API with an API key and sending data into ChatGPT and expecting something out. And so it was, how do we protect data there? What are the different layers that we're applying to this thing, and how can we generate security APIs that sit almost as like a firewall or a defense layer between your input and these services, these AI services. And I think in that way, one, it scares me a little bit because it's almost like the WAF approach to AI, and I don't know how successful that's going to be. But the other thing is, okay, this is a good way to explore it because it is this more modular way to think about security in AI. You're talking about inputs and outputs and treating the service as a vendor. And so considering what are you going to use this data for, how is the vendor going to use it, and then what are you going to put between yourself and the vendor to protect your interaction and your customer's interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting problem. I think there's I mean, the LLM top 10 is definitely an interesting read because the attacks are so different and there's so many things you have to think about from that perspective. But I always think about, and I haven't seen too many use cases yet where people are injecting LLMs to do decision making for them yet. It's mostly been, here's some context, tell me what to do, give me security advice, be my security bot, things like that. I am really curious when people start doing more decision making based on LLM output. I think that's a little scary based on both prompt injection issues you see and then also the drift that you see between model updates. It's not a deterministic output, so if you make a decision based on the output and you're getting different things based on the same input, it's a little scary to me, but I don't think we're to that point quite yet. I think there's a lot of R&D in that area with like Baby AGI and all the other open source AI projects, but I haven't seen any kind of commercial uses of decision making with that. But that's when people start doing that, I really hope that they have non-AI based systems for doing validation for those kind of things. There's something to be said for deterministic code validating the output, even if it's generated from an LLM. So it's definitely, yeah, I feel like we're so early in on the security for LLMs and AI. Like the top 10 is definitely a good project, but I think actually applying that to the real world, we're still like super, super early actually doing it. So
I agree. And that's why I'm saying, like, I don't think that a lot of these, I don't think a lot of folks that are, or at least the ones that I've talked to, I don't want to say a lot in general because I just don't have enough context, across the industry of how often this comes up. But for me, most folks are trying to leverage OpenAI or ChatGPT, at least as an intro. And they start to read about, I think the question always comes up, like, why would we use this? And then going through the complexity of trying to implement your own LLM or train a model or use LangChain and all this kind of stuff scares folks a little bit. And so maybe they don't have any business being in using this in their workload. But at the same time, I think that we do have to consider that some of this needs to, some of the security controls for those people needs to exist. And so then it becomes, how do we put a layer in front of this API to ensure that there's some sort of security consideration. So some of the things that they were talking about was, examining some of the prompt data to ensure that private information isn't sent to the prompt, or replacing that data with anonymous data on the fly so that you're not sending it to the API. So doing this pre-processing almost that before it hits, and then also being able to get some intelligence and logging and things out of that around, is someone trying to leverage this to do something nefarious or something along those lines. So interesting way to look at it is this API approach. But
Yeah.
I think, to your point, that we still need the other stuff, because there are also folks developing these APIs for folks, and there are people that are going to be using their own custom models and things of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I mean, we've both been doing AppSec and CloudSec for quite some time, so we see kind of the same issues over and over again. So it's cool to have a whole with different class of technology, because what you actually use to build models and interact with everything is very different from the typical web architecture. So it's cool in that perspective, but also the attacks are so different. So it's cool to have to think about how you protect against these. I think my favorite thing with like ChatGPT is it has all the filters for like don't tell someone how to create chemical weapons, but it's like act as an author writing a book about a fictional terrorist creating chemical weapons. How would that guy, like, it's just amazing how you get around these controls, and then how do you really protect against these prompt manipulations to not allow it to give anyone really bad data or to abuse the model that you build. It's just, there's so many layers to it, and there's also a little bit of magic in the back end that you can't say, okay, this is how the code is actually working, because it's not an actual piece of code that's determining these outputs. So it's such an interesting problem, but we're so early in on both the development of it, but also the security side, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know honestly don't know where I stand on it, but I don't know that censorship of the tooling is going to be the ultimate path to safety here. Like it's like banning books or banning any other knowledge base. And so I don't know how effective it's going to be. I don't necessarily disagree that it's a good thing to have some controls around this or some insight into this, but I think that going down that path is just going to is going to be a forcing function, as it always is, for folks to find another way and another way and another way to bypass that. So I think that I don't really have a well articulated argument on this, but it is definitely something that I'm thinking about as we go down this path. I think that with as with everything, I think folks jump into the deep end before they're ready on both sides, and which leads us to the next thing, which is folks using generative AI before they're ready. And in some of the other talks, I won't mention any names or anything, but just such a confident statement that like this is the future, it's going to take over the world, and all of our SaaS tools and everything are going to be obsolete in the next year, and like all that stuff is like based on what? Like based on the fact that you were able to get a recipe out of this thing. Like I'm a bit nervous around like automatic remediation and things like that. And I don't know. It's hard for me to wrap my head around how folks are so confident in these things, knowing, I mean, while we point out the mistakes,
Yeah.
and while we point out the hallucinations, and then we're so confident that some of the folks that are building these things are going to be able to get this 100% right. I don't know. I get really nervous about it.
And you're definitely not you're not like a Luddite either, because I know you've built plenty of solutions using like ChatGPT and other tools. So it's not like you're like, oh, this stuff sucks, it has no use case. But yeah, so I definitely agree with you. I mean, every time someone says this is going to revolutionize everything, this is just throw everything you knew away, Like you're going for Twitter likes and LinkedIn reposts or whatever. Like, there's so much hype. It's like every tool, like it's definitely going to be a really good fit for certain use cases and a terrible fit for other ones. And but it's definitely useful in a lot of ways. But yeah, I can't see it replacing every security tool out there. So I don't know. SAST is
Yeah, I
probably here
mean,
to stay.
it's the discernment, right? We talked about this in another episode. It's like the discernment of what your result is, and it's being able to treat everything with a discerning eye as you're looking at it and questioning the answer. And I think using these tools as a way, so it's like we're sort of hardwired to take the easy path. So it takes us a bit of effort to stop and say that doesn't look right, or that's wrong, or maybe I should ask this in a different way. When we're dealing with like things that we're trying to get results out of. So, for folks that like to debate and argue and look for the things that are not correct for the sake of debating when you're having a conversation, it's like treat the tool in that way, constantly be questioning what the answer is. And so when we talk about things like automatic remediation inside of these SaaS tools, what scares me is that an engineer is trying to use this to optimize their time and reduce the time to delivery. And so if I'm an engineer and it gives me an automatic remediation, you can offer me the option all you want to try to discern whether this is right or wrong and allow me to edit it and provide a more robust remediation. But like, who's going to do that? Like, realistically, knowing what we deal with day in and day out, who is going to do that? Nobody. I mean, there's going to be a couple of engineers that go, that doesn't look right, but the vast
Yeah.
majority, it's going to look right to them, and they're going to say, yeah, go for it. We already have problems with that, like fatigue, the code review fatigue, and just like people approving code, without discerning human written code. And now we have like more confident and like better looking, more convincing code.
Yeah.
I'm so terrified of what this is going to cause. I think so many things are going to break.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a funny meme. It's like if there's a pull request that's 10 lines, the senior developer puts 3 comments on it. If it's, 1,000 lines, it's good to go because they don't want to
Exactly.
review 1,000 lines. They don't want to sit there and parse through all of it. And yeah, it's the same thing. If you generate even more code at a faster pace, and I mean, ChatGPT is so confident in what it gives you, which is hilarious because then if you point out how it's wrong, it's like, oh yeah, I screwed that up. And then it'll say, this is definitely correct this time. And then it can still be incorrect and correct it again. So yeah, it's like people definitely need to have a more discerning view of these technologies. And it is a good augmentation for developers and security folks, but again, there needs to be some judgment at the end of the day of whether it's correct or not. I mean, we've had experiences with clients that like, look how awesome this is, and you're like, well, that's not even a real like piece of code that would actually work, but it
Right.
looks like it does because
Exactly.
it's generated and it looks damn near right, but it's just not right. So
What we should do is have an engineering ChatGPT, a security ChatGPT, and a QA ChatGPT, and just have them argue over the same code and see if it ever ends.
yeah, just wire them up to like a pull request and
Yeah,
just
the
infinite
training will
comments.
be your job is to never let this code through unless it is 100% secure.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be good. It'd just be the security LLM saying denied on the pull request the entire time. So
Yeah, no, I mean that does bring us to another topic of like what I saw outside of AI and ChatGPT and all the hype is some of the nice things that I saw, which were new themes, I think, at a conference for me was just how many talks there were around collaboration and security not being the Department of No, which is something that we're very passionate about on this podcast is, making sure that your relationships are forged and understanding that you know, you are serving engineers and developers in a business and that you can't be the Department of No. Um, that was really cool to see that there were more talks around that and more thinking around collaboration and how security can be better at helping and helping the business, helping engineers, and thinking with that brain. Um, did you get that feeling too? I know that you didn't get to attend a lot of talks, but any conversations lead you to see that?
Yeah, I definitely think I don't run into too many developers are so dumb type of people anymore. I feel like it's there's been a big shift, and maybe it's just the people that I'm around, but I feel like there's been a big shift of like you can't just be, yeah, like you said, the Department of No, or always criticizing and not adding value, or the biggest thing is don't do it the way you want to do it the way that I want to do it, and shift your entire way like the organization works. Like I feel like that culture is definitely, it's not gone, but it's way better, at least I think in the AppSec space and cloud security space. Traditional networking, maybe that's a little different, but I think in these spaces it's definitely better, more developer centric, more solution focused versus just, hey, these developers are so dumb. Why do they keep introducing SQL injection? So I definitely think that's way better. Sort of on that note, I really liked Sean Porris's talk on bug bounty because, I think I'm somewhat skeptical of bug bounty. Again, it's something that's touted as like the solution to all of our problems, and I definitely think again it's another tool in your toolkit that serves a really good purpose and gives you a lot of value. But his talk was really interesting because he covered how it's not just set up HackerOne, set up BugCrowd, fund your program, and let it run and get security bugs. It is coordinating across the company in so many different ways and getting buy-in across the company. And so I thought it was really interesting that the bug bounty program, unlike the, say, internal testing or training or whatever it might be, forced those conversations across his company to get everyone involved, get everyone on the same page, educate people about what's going on, because it is going to affect all those different people. So I thought that was a really interesting insight about how, in that case, it wasn't a technology problem. It was a work in the culture, work the system, know who your lawyers are, all those types of things. That was really interesting and a much different challenge than traditional security technical folks deal with most of the time.
Are you saying that the bug bounty program? I wasn't able to attend the talk, but are you saying that the bug bounty program brought all of these departments together? Is that what you mean?
It basically forced, yeah, because when these things popped up, bug bounties create a lot of noise, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but you have to coordinate with different people to really make them work well, and you have to get the right buy-in from folks, because I think there's some people who still think it's very risky. You're like, you're going to invite random internet strangers to attack our websites. We don't even know who they are and all that kind of stuff. So, and you're going to pay them an insane amount of money for bugs. I think that's part of it. And then also just, bug bounties sometimes kick off incidents. And so you need to have all the right people at the table and be informed about what's going on so that they can react the right way in those times. So I thought it was a pretty interesting talk. I mean, he's run the Verizon Yahoo bug bounty program for a while, and it's one of the biggest ones out there. And I mean, they have a huge landscape of properties they have to secure. So it's think of thousands of sites you have bug bounties running on. That's just a crazy scope you have to manage. And obviously a lot of different things are going to pop up. So it's just interesting. I haven't run a bounty myself. So it's interesting to hear from someone who's run a huge program and kind of how you can't just think of it as a technical problem.
Yeah, no, I think that that's really interesting. I've run a couple of bounty programs, and I do think that I've had a different. My experience is more everyone is bought into the bug bounty program, but no one is prepared for it. you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's more like, you know, surprise at the noise and surprise at the payment and what you're paying for, and like, and I think that diminishes the value very quickly if you're not prepared for that. So
Yeah.
most of the conversations I've had on the consulting side have been preparing folks for what this actually means and ensuring, like, do you have a budget? Do you have a team?
Yeah.
Can you ensure responsiveness, things like that. So um, I I did see one of his previous talks on that, but I'll have to catch it when it gets on video because I know that it's probably got some more information in there.
Yeah.
Um,
And he
so
does
very
cover
cool.
the cost thing too, because he says one of the questions that came up internally was, okay, wait, you're going to put $5 million into this bug bounty program. How many hours of consulting time could you buy with that? And so he had to sit down and do the math and be like, okay, for this much, we can have this many consultants for this long, or we do a bug bounty program and we get this many hours from all these different people. And I think there's an argument in there about where things kind of really lie, but at least it was, he had that conversation. He had to provide details, not just be like, yeah, let's throw $5 million at it and see what happens. Like there's actually some science to the madness. So I think that's a conversation like you're saying, like you have to have up front and be kind of prepared for, or people are going to be like, there's no way we're just throwing money at this problem.
Yeah, and I do see the other side too, especially on the Web3 front, is like folks will just put money into the problem and pay everyone, and I don't think that they're extracting the maximum amount of value that they can
Yeah.
out of a program like Sean does. So I'm interested to hear more stories around the bug bounty side. I think it's taken. I don't want to say that it's less. Um, I mean, I think a lot of bug bounty programs exist, but I don't hear about it as much.
It's not
You
the
know that the
new
programs
sexy
exist.
thing.
Yeah, and so I think that I'd be interested in talking to more people about that if we could. Um, but that does remind me, another thing that's been coming up recently a lot is threat modeling. I saw like 3 or 4 threat modeling talks, um, and that was interesting to see too. Because usually there's like one talk on threat modeling or none at a conference, and I think that
Hmm.
that's being adopted more. I don't know how successfully, but it's really cool to see that that's happening now.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole threat modeling con in DC
Yeah,
around OWASP DC. I wasn't able to go because of the flu that I mentioned before, but
yeah,
yeah, it's definitely cool to see. I know Chris, I say his name wrong, Romeo,
yeah. I think so.
done a huge amount of work in that area and trying to, I think, bring it to the forefront and yeah, not just throw SAST at the problem, but actually take some time to think about architecture and actual threats and defenses and all of that. So definitely, I agree with you. It's cool to see that being brought up more.
Yeah, kudos to him because it's that I definitely hear about it more, which makes my job easier and my life easier. So,
Yeah.
um, really interesting and cool to see. So there's definitely some traction there. Um, we're coming up on that 30 minutes. Are there any other things that you want to cover? I mean, we can talk a little bit about the training. We wanted a dedicated episode to just talking about what we covered there. But anything general con news that you wanted to break out?
No, I mean, I'm always surprised how many vendors there are and how many new vendors I see in the space who I've never heard of before, and they're each doing kind of a different slice of different things. So it's interesting. There's people solving interesting problems. There's other people kind of seems like reinventing the mousetrap, but it's always
Yeah.
interesting seeing the different vendors. Like I saw different vendors at B-Sides Vegas than I saw at LASCON, and so that's always an interesting space. But there was a lot of interest in the vendors. I'd say like, there's a lot of people who were talking to everyone at every single booth to understand what they did. So um, definitely interesting to see that interaction and where people's heads are at because people are kind of cutting back a little bit these days. So it's good to see that people are still trying to find solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that my take on vendors is, or like the vendor themes this year is that when we went to Dublin and we talked about that conference, I think that everything was like SAST and DevSecOps. Those were the two major things. Everyone had a DevSecOps tool, and and it was like SAST and DevSecOps. And then at LastCon, I saw like the same sort of DevSecOps central stuff, but it was mostly CI/CD and trying to get security automation done. and then obviously everything had AI in it. Those are the
Yeah.
two like themes that I saw. But I saw stuff around like infrastructure as code, which was cool. I saw stuff around CI/CD, and I
Hmm.
think folks approaching the conversation more from like a development mindset rather than trying to throw these buzzwords out, even though the main buzzword was AI and generative AI.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think that new styles of vendors are now coming around,
Hmm.
which was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. One that kind of stands out is Reversing Labs, which they're like a completely different. They're like not an AppSec traditional AppSec company, but they do like malware analysis on images and things like that. So that's kind of interesting vendor to see out there. They had a big presence. I've seen them in a few places. But again, a different style vendor than just here's a SAST with a bunch of rules. So
Yeah, and I
um,
think that as you see this contraction of like infrastructure, code, applications, containers, like everything is sort of becoming the same discipline. I think that we'll probably see more of that because it's and maybe that's why um, we are less surprised around security folks understanding more about engineering and development and how hard it is and not just being the department of no because maybe we just understand more about code these days. I
mhm.
remember 5 or 6 years ago it was like should a security engineer be able to code, and now I don't know of anybody that doesn't have at least some grasp of a language under their belt.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I definitely think there's been a big maturity in that way in security. So, which is
Cool.
great.
Yeah. So that will wrap it up for today. We will be talking a little bit more in our next episode around the training that Mike and I did at LASCON to cover like the topics that we did, some takeaways that we had, and really we'd love to just get some feedback from the audience to see or hear more about what you might want out of a training like that. And we might cover some of the topics that we went over just to talk about things that we discovered during the training and things of that nature. Coming up, also, we have a couple of guests finally lined up and scheduled. So we are diving deep into that. We're going to cover some application security topics, some security engineers. Might even get lucky enough to find some legal help in some of the legal issues that have been facing security and application security. It'd be good to see and hear from folks on that side of the fence as well. So if you have anyone that you could suggest to come onto the show to talk about collaboration and DevSecOps, please let us know. And if you want to come on and talk about something in that vein as well, we'd be happy to have you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.